The judgment of the Presidential Election Petition Court, PEPC, which on Wednesday, the 6th of September, affirmed the victory of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in the February 25th presidential and National Assembly elections, may just be the beginning of another legal firework that is shifting to the Supreme Court. Expectedly, mixed reactions have continued to trail the judgment of the tribunal. The candidates of the two leading opposition political parties, Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, and his counterpart in the Labour Party, Peter Obi, had approached the court seeking to obtain the results of the elections declared by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC.
The unanimous ruling of the five-man panel led by Justice Haruna Tsammani dismissed the consolidated petitions of the PDP, the APM, and the Labour Party, saying their petition accordingly lacks merit. But of course, one big question remains. It is the question on the Supreme Court. Is that where the answer lies? And is the Supreme Court the answer? This morning, we're joined by Prince Adewole Adebayo. He was the presidential candidate of the Social Democratic Party, SDP, in the 2023 general elections. Good morning, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Good to be here.
All right. Before we get into the question of the Supreme Court, let's go back to the situation as is. Let's look at what is obtainable. And we'd like to find out what your thoughts were about the judgment of the Presidential Election Petition Court, the proceedings and the judgment. What were your thoughts on it?
Well, what I would say first is that the position which I maintained immediately after the election is what the court has validated. Because I have a unique advantage that I participated in the election, right from the primaries to the general election. I'm also a lawyer who has been in election matter for over 2 decades. So I know what the rules are. That's why you see that I didn't, one of the reasons why I didn't go and file any petition at all. And if you see my interviews, review my interviews from March, when the election was announced, till when the proceeding went on, I made it clear that there's a difference between what happened on the field, on the street, on election day, and what is before the court. So your chances of succeeding in court is tied to how what you file in court can present to the court the actuality that happened on the street. Once what is before the court is different from what happened on the street, the judgment will reflect how the court views what is filed before it, and it may not bear any reality what happened on the street. So if you look at that judgment in law, you will score the judges 98 to 99%. On every issue, you got the law correct. So from a legal point of view, you cannot fault the judgment. But from a social point of view, it's like someone who witnessed a car wreck that happened in front of your building. And from the window, you could see the car wreck. And then months later, when you see the judgment and the court, they say the car that ran into the car, or the other car ran into people, that driver is not guilty. You'll be surprised, but I saw it. In reality, you live in Surulere, but the person who went to court said the accident took place in Ikoyi, and the car that ran into somebody is a blue sedan, and the person filed a case and said that it's a trailer. So the courts, those are the things that you find. That's why you see that difficult to reconcile for you. You say, oh, in my polling unit, something happened. But in reality, the evidence of that your polling unit has not been brought before the court. The person went to the court to talk about the qualification of the other candidates, what happens to the status of FCT, the nomination of the vice president of the other party, what happens in America 30 years ago, and things like that. They don't have any bearing to what happened on election day. That is what happened in the court. So what the petitioner went to court to litigate did not relate to what happened. They were litigating constitutional issues and other statutory arguments. So that is what the court decided.
All right, and also this is totally different. There have been residents in Abuja who have said that they also deserve to have elections run in Abuja so they can have their own representatives, their own governor, their own, leaders. What are your thoughts on this, especially because the Presidential Election Petition Court did, in this matter, consider Abuja as a state no different from the others?
It's a comedy show they're doing. In politics, we do the serious, we do the comic, we do all of that. It's a comedy show because the Abuja as a federal capital territory is a constitutional creation. And in the Constitution, how Abuja will be administered is written there. Abuja will be administered by the president himself by appointing a minister. So it can even happen tomorrow that the president may decide to put FCT under the Minister of Interior. It's a ministry. So the person who is running Abuja, the governor of Abuja under our constitution, is the president. And the president decided to create a ministry. There is no ministry of FCT in our constitution. We only have 36 states and a federal capital territory. But what the constitution says is that anything you give to the states, you give the FCT its own. Anyway, if you share money with the states, you share with the FCT. If you do anything with the states, you do the FCT. So if there's a requirement that people should vote, allow the people of FCT to vote as if they were a state. People don't understand the history of it. The history of it is that we copy our constitution from the United States, some part of it, or major part of it, especially the presidential aspect of it. And in the United States, the federal capital, which is the District of Columbia, does not count in presidential election. So if you are living in Washington, D.C., you are living in the District of Columbia, your vote doesn't count in the Electoral College for presidential election. Because they don't treat District of Columbia as a state. America has 50 states, full stop. And only the electors from those 50 states can come to Congress to elect the president. So we wanted to make our own difference by saying, when you are counting our votes, count the states and FCT. It's not an attempt to make FCT above. It is to make FCT to belong. So all of us have argued this. It's very clear in the law. I believe that even many of the lawyers who argue for the petitioners have argued the opposite in many cases before. So there's nothing unique about it. So anyone who's in FCT going to court asking to direct the president or how you govern the FCT, the court is not where they should do that. They can go to National Assembly and get them to amend the Constitution or pass an FCT Act, a new FCT Act, which the president may sign. And they can create a majority for Abuja or whatever. And we can revert to what we used to have in Lagos before, when Lagos was the federal capital. And we had a governor of Lagos. But it was an issue between, I remember the dynamics between Jakonde and Shagari. Both of them are in Abuja, were in Lagos. And they became almost like partners. And many people in the UPN, where Jakonde belonged, were saying that Jakonde moved to the MPN because the governor of Lagos and the governor and the president of Nigeria had to work together all the time to deal with the issue of Lagos. So I believe that is probably what added to the wisdom of saying, okay, now that we're in Abuja, the federal capital territory should be under the president. There will be no governor. So imagine a situation where you have governorship and one party becomes the governor and the other party brings the president. So the two of them might be struggling over who is controlling the city. So but it's not a legal issue. There's nothing the court can do about that.
Yeah, well, I think, the argument really, and of course, before we move into the Supreme Court discussions, is that these things and the decisions that the Supreme Court eventually takes will set the precedents for how, elections and decisions will be made going forward, and these things would be cast in stone. The status of Abuja, the decisions concerning INEC and its usal of the IREV the idea of double nomination, and everything, that the Supreme Court eventually decides will set, whatever precedents that Nigeria holds going forward. But I before we get there, I want to.
Can I ask something about that? These cases will
kindly hold on. We'll get there. I just want, your view, on the quality of elections that we're talking about here, because now we've gone to the Supreme Court to legitimize elections that I'm sure a lot of Nigerians saw flaws, a lot of flaws that were noticed in those elections, even after INEC was given about 400 billion naira. But there were flaws, there were, election results that, you could see were not uploaded on the IREV. Of course, that has now been ignored as unimportant. But INEC, of course, still would need to, defend somehow, some way, how it came to the conclusion, with those who won the elections. But there is those parts. There was violence, there was bigotry, there was mutilated election sheets. All of these have just been ignored. So I want your thoughts on, the quality of elections that we are currently, or the tribunal is currently defending, or, has allowed to, slide.
Let's just get this, just to get it clear. There are no new precedents set by these cases. These petitions, even when they get to the Supreme Court, they will set no new precedent. No new question will be answered. The Supreme Court will only repeat what is already heard before. So the lawyers to the petitioners and the lawyers to the respondent, they know that they are not raising new issues. That is very clear. None of the issues that went before the Court of Appeal was a new issue.
What I mean by precedents that we said is that whatever the Supreme Court decides is what will then be law going forward. And that includes everything that has been raised, with, the current petitions.
No, what I'm saying to you is that the petitioners know the law. The law is what the Court of Appeal has already said. The law has been clear. There's no precedent that we will follow. Next election, God forbid that we have a bad election again. Next election, people will still go and litigate the same issue again. Let me make it very clear. Supreme Court settled the issue of Abuja status long ago. I myself, I stood in front of the Supreme Court when the Supreme Court settled the issue that we should not come to them again to try to enforce INEC regulations. I did many cases. In fact, one of them it was so painful to me was Emeho versus Okowa. I argued before the Supreme Court. I didn't have even 5 minutes to argue my case. They were all pouncing on me. How can you come here to tell us about INEC regulation? It's not the law. It's not relevant to us, and all of that. So all lawyers know it. And then on October 1st, 2021, at one hotel, I don't want to mention the name so that you don't charge me for advert, in Abuja, on October 1, 2021. That's about 18 months before the election. Political parties, presidential aspirants, INEC, all of us assembled. And it was televised live. And when it was my time to speak, people were praising INEC, all this reform, and I spoke and I said, listen, don't be deceived. INEC will switch up their server on election day, and they will tell you they have technological problem. So you are journalists, I will give you the reference, you can go and get the live telecast, and you can play it. I said exactly, I said, don't be deceived. This INEC regulation is not going to be binding on anybody. So I knew before I went to the election, and in many meetings that we had with INEC, these same political parties were always praising INEC. Maybe Ole Sowore and I would always tackle INEC to say, we don't trust you, this system like this, what is it need to do? So generally speaking, it is not now that the courts have told us that INEC telling you, I'm going to transmit the result this way, I'm going to use golden paper to write the result. All of those things are not going to help you. The most important thing that can help you in an election is that on the day of the election, you have your registered agent. And after the election has been concluded, your agent collects the result. You yourself will now collate, you ought to have your own party internal IREF for yourself. You now collect all your own results. Anytime they go to the collation center and the result that is announced is different from the one your agent brought, you take note of it. So when you are filing your petition before the court, you will go with all your result sheets, like it was done in the case of Aregbesola versus Oyinola. They came with all their results and demonstrated to the court, see my result for the polling unit, see the one INEC declared. You can see from the one INEC gave me in the polling unit, it is clear that I won the election. They did the tabulation, they call expert with the analysis. Now, court will now ask INEC to bring their own official copy of the one they gave to you. If INEC doesn't bring it, the court will presume INEC is hiding something. The petitioners in this case, they didn't do that. How can you call 13 witnesses to help you testify when you are contesting 86,000? So if one of the polling units is in Port Harcourt and your witness is in Ondo, how is he going to help you? That's not the kind of evidence you lead in court. So what you need to understand is that you have to bring your evidence to the court. And if you listen again to my interview when a competing station invited me for an interview after the election and they were questioning me, why will you not go to court? I told them clearly, 4 reasons why I will not go to court. 1, the results from my agent did not show to me that I won the election. But the results from my agent showed to me that many of my votes have been stolen. Many places where my party won, it was given to PDP. Many places where we won was given to Labour. Many places where we won was given to APC. So, and I can't join all the other losers with me to go to court. Second, the idea that INEC did not transmit the result through beavers is not relevant in court. I'm a lawyer. The court will not listen to me. The court will say it's not relevant. Bring the result from the polling unit. Let us help you compute it. It could know what INEC didn't do. Thirdly, I said there are many issues that happen on election day, including people pay bribe to buy votes, violence, and all of that. You cannot prove them in court. Because to prove violence in court, you have to bring the person who committed violence or the victim and mention them. And I mentioned one case that I did where Buhari said several persons were killed in the election he contested in 2007. And I argued before the court that there's nothing known to law called several persons were killed. The court agreed with me. You cannot go to court and say several people were beaten up, several people were killed. You have to say Mr. A, age 39, was killed. Mrs. B, age 40, was beaten up. You have to bring all of them. You have to testify. Yeah. You don't have that kind of time.
Mr. Adebayo.
Lastly, that advocacy is a better way. So the fact that an election has been lost and won contested doesn't mean that civil society will not come out. Just like you are calling me now.
Yeah.
We can start highlighting what the problems are, and then we can now solve the problem for the political party, to the INEC, the security agencies, all of that.
Yeah, but this is where I find that there might be a problem, because what you've said now is that no matter how chaotic and on its head the electoral processes, the leadership recruitment processes, anybody with the worst academic records or whatever can contest elections, win it through violence, through rigging, or any other means. And the court will go ahead and legitimize that victory, just simply because the opposition doesn't have enough clear-cut details and evidence and proof in court for that election to be upturned. And doesn't that sound dangerous for Nigeria going forward? Because this is what you tweeted this about 3 days ago. It says here in your tweet, in the 2023 elections, the politicians failed Nigeria. Political parties failed Nigeria. INEC failed Nigeria. The media failed Nigeria. But the judiciary has not failed Nigeria. How does a country move forward if everything fails, and then the only thing, which is meant to be the last hope of the common man as they've described it, legitimizes that process?
First and foremost, it's not the judiciary that can legitimize the election. Before you file your petition at all, the election is already legitimized, because there is something in law called presumption of regularity. The law says, as at the day INEC announces Mr. X as the winner of an election, everybody in Nigeria, including the court, has to presume that that person is the winner. That's the law. So judges can't change the law. Judges are just there to apply the law. So right from the beginning, it's not the court. The legal system has already legitimized. There are reforms you can do. Other countries don't do their own that way. Other countries don't legitimize a winner just because the electoral body says so. They have another method. And if you have time, I can suggest some of the methods. But our legal system says once INEC announces you, even if you didn't participate in the election, if INEC just announce your name and say, you are the winner, right from your studio now, INEC can announce that you are a senator from Kogi State, even though you are not from that state. The court is supposed to regard you as a senator from Kogi State. Now, if I'm challenging it and I want to go to court to say, you are not even a person who contested with us. You have not even been to Kogi State before. The court will say, show it to me. And if I'm careless, or my lawyer is careless, or we have just played around, and we started saying that we don't have certificates, another thing, we don't state the case clearly, the court will say, all of this issue of certificate you're asking me, it is not my job. I'm election tribunal. We should have gone to high court to argue that one. Second one, this one you said he didn't pay his party nomination form. Are you a member of his party? It's not relevant. This one you say that, so all of that, they will start to raise the issue. You say, where is your own resource sheet that you won the election? You say, I don't have it. The court will say you're supposed to have it. So what I'm bringing out is that the way to resolve it is not to make our court to do a job that's not their own. The court is not part of your political process. The court is to apply the law. So when you have a political problem, don't go to court. When you have a legal problem, go to court. So the court is not the place where you go and retrieve your political fortune. No. What the court will do for you is, in this your politics, are there legal issues that are pending that I can resolve for you?
Right.
Put those issues before me. If you don't put it, the court, even the judge himself, went to vote and the judge was beaten up in the polling unit. The judge will still wait for you to bring the evidence before the court. That is how they are trained. And that's why I said the court played their role. But I knew from the beginning that with the way the election was done, even when the court plays its role, it will not resolve the problem.
Right.
The problem don't lie with the law.
I'm glad that you're speaking about the court playing its role, and I'd like to find out, this brings us to the crux of today's conversation, the Supreme Court and the role of the Supreme Court in all of this. What do you think, or how, you said that the court has affirmed your earlier position currently. Do you think that the Supreme Court will affirm the same position that you maintain, or do you think that the judgment will go in a different direction?
100%. In fact, left to me, it's just that left to me, there should be no petition to Supreme Court. There should no appeal to Supreme Court. Because you are just going there to receive a photocopy of the Court of Appeal judgment. So where the Court of Appeal say we hold, the Supreme Court will just say we are found. The lower court is correct. Lower court is correct. Lower court is correct. There's nothing you can do about it. Because the lower court applies Supreme Court decision. So the Supreme Court cannot overrule a court which rely on it. The Court of Appeal relies on Supreme Court to make the decision made now. And the Supreme Court will not change its mind on that. And then you can't lead evidence in Supreme Court. So there's nothing new to add. Maybe the lawyers just do it for professional satisfaction. But ideally, it's a waste of time, really. The court will not even spend more than 2 hours before they throw it away. That's clearly from my experience of Supreme Court. And it will be unanimous. It will unanimously say there's no merit to the appeal.
Wow.
Even there are some decisions that the Court of Appeal made against INEC. There are some decisions that the Court of Appeal made against APC in the petition for the Court of Appeal. Maybe people didn't take note of that. There are some technical objections that APC raised, INEC raised, to throw away the petition. Exactly, if APC files cross appeal or INEC files cross appeal, the Supreme Court will dismiss all the appeals and the cross appeals. Yeah, that's very clear. This doesn't mean that justices of Supreme Court are happy with the election. No, it's just their law, the way it works. It's just like you have your cousin that works in a bank, and went with you when you went to deposit your money.
Yeah, all right.
In the
Mr. Adebayo.
If you go to cash your money, your person will still ask you, where's your checkbook? They will not just give you the money.
Yeah.
You have to follow the rule of the land.
All right, Mr. Adebayo. Unfortunately, we would have to end the conversation here, but I like that you've broken it down in your, from your perspective. We would see what the Supreme Court eventually says, in a couple of weeks, I believe. And of course, we'd like to have you back again to share your thoughts, and see if your predictions are just exactly, the same way. Thanks very much for stopping by.
It's a pleasure. God bless Nigeria.